Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true and disturbing stories about the Appalachian Mountains. These are the hidden truths, the ones the locals are too scared to speak out loud. But before we begin, please consider subscribing, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. Now let's start. My cousin Iris had been living in this quiet little corner of western North Carolina for almost a year. She split her time between working at a food co-op and doing freelance photography gigs, mostly portraits and artsy nature shots. We'd never been super close growing up, but once I transferred to a college in Tennessee, we started talking more, texting here and there, sending each other weird memes or random TikToks. It wasn't deep, but it was something. So when she invited me to spend spring break with her in a cabin she'd rented through some low-tech off-grid community board, I didn't hesitate. I had no big plans, and the idea of disappearing into the woods for a few days sounded perfect. She made it sound like a retreat. No Wi-Fi, no signal, just books, food, and trees. It's good for the brain, she said. We drove out together in her dented Subaru, music playing low as the road narrowed, pavement fading into gravel. The last stretch wound through a thicket of bare trees and opened near a small ranger station. That's where we left the car. Iris said the cabin wasn't reachable by vehicle. We had to hike in. The trail wasn't official, not on the maps, no signs pointing the way. She'd found it on a hiker's forum and confirmed it on Google Earth. Right away, it felt off. The trail was overgrown. Not just neglected, but like no one had walked it in years. Within 10 minutes, we climbed over 2 fallen trees and passed a trail sign that had been smashed in half, shoved face down in the mud. I asked if she was sure. She shrugged. It's fine. The cabin was really a shack. A square wooden box tucked into the side of a hill. One room, no insulation. A couple of solar lights. A small propane stove, the kind from a camper van. No plumbing. No reception. No sign anyone had used it recently. Iris seemed thrilled. It sat just above a dry creek bed, shallow and rocky like it hadn't seen water in years. Across from us, the ridge climbed into thick forest. Iris said there were cabins farther up, but we didn't see anyone all week. No hikers, no voices, just us. The first couple of days were fine. Nice even. We made basic meals, soup, pasta, oatmeal. Read from old paperbacks Iris had brought. Played cards by lantern light. It was boring in the best way. At night, we listened to the cabin creak. No cars, no city noise, just quiet. I slept like a rock. Then, on the third morning, we found something. A piece of paper nailed to the inside of the cabin door. Not taped, nailed. A long, bent nail punched through the top. The page was yellowed, brittle, folded down the middle. We opened it carefully. In uneven block letters it read, "Hike to the dry side. Follow the mossless path." No name, no signature, no date. I stared at it, waiting for the joke. Iris snorted. Creepy as hell, but someone's just messing around. She folded it, slid it into the back of her notebook. I said, maybe we should hike down, report it. She rolled her eyes. Probably just some trail guy being weird. Mountain people love spooky crap. That afternoon, she convinced me to check out a trail she'd found on an old online map, labeled Dry Run. Just a dotted line on a topographic PDF she'd printed at home. No signs pointed to it. We bushwhacked through brush, crossed the dry creek, and found the start. I kept thinking about the note. About 20 minutes in, I noticed something strange. The trees. At first, it was subtle. On the left, every trunk had a thick stripe of moss running up one side, like painted green. On the right, every trunk was bare. Not just without moss, without bark. Smooth, pale, sanded, wrong. I pointed it out. Iris brushed it off. Said it was sun exposure, maybe the slope, but after that, neither of us talked much. The silence felt heavier, each step harder, like the air was water. We came to a fork. One side climbed toward the ridge, steep and tangled. The other dropped into a gully lined with rows of smooth, pale trees. Guess that's the mossless path, Iris said. No irony this time. I hesitated. She started walking. I followed. Almost immediately, the air cooled. The ground felt spongy with damp leaves, though the air was dry. The trees loomed, too tall, too still. Then we realized, no sound, no wind, no birds, not even our footsteps. The forest had swallowed it all. Iris crouched ahead. There's tile here. I stepped closer. Beneath the leaves, white ceramic tile. Cracked, some scorched black. A few feet away, the outline of a foundation. Blackened boards. Crumbling corners. The faint remains of a house. This was a house, Iris whispered. I nodded, but my head was heavy. My mouth dry. My arms tingled. I crouched lower and nearly fell. The ground pulled at me. Then I saw it. A small green coat. Child-sized. Faded. Torn sleeve. Broken zipper. Half buried under what might have been the porch. I reached for it. Iris grabbed my wrist. Don't, she said. Her hand shook. It shocked me when I tried. Then we heard it. 3 knocks. Not behind us. Not in the trees. From below. Deep, slow, hollow, deliberate. I couldn't move. My body locked. My heart slammed, but nothing else worked. Iris said something, but I couldn't hear her. I tried to stand. The world tilted. Everything went black. When I woke, I was on the forest floor. Dirt in my mouth. My body slick with sweat. Iris was kneeling beside me, crying. She said I'd gone limp. No pulse. She'd screamed, started CPR, slapped me until I came back. I remembered none of it. We didn't speak on the way back. I could barely walk. My legs felt hollow. But as we moved farther from that place, the forest returned. Birds again. Pressure lifting. That night we packed. At 4 in the morning, we hiked back to the car in silence. Right before we left, Iris ran back inside for her camera battery. When she came out, she was pale. She was holding the flyer. It had been repinned to the inside of the door. Same message. Same nail. We never told anyone. Not for a long time. Months later, in October, Iris sent me a podcast. Appalachian folklore. Stories of towns erased from maps. Cleared for dams. Burned out in mining disasters. Whole communities gone. One of them was called Mossdale. Burned in 1963. 12 families lost. Locals had tried everything to keep people away. Rerouted trails. False maps. Warnings nailed to doors. Warnings like, hike to the dry side, follow the mossless path, and whispered after that, don't stop. Don't turn around. My Uncle Ron had this old cabin way out in the Blue Hollow Mountains. Deep woods, no neighbors, no cell signal, and no streetlights. Just a narrow dirt road curved up forever and eventually disappeared behind trees that looked like they had not been touched in decades. Once you were there, that was it. You did not see another house, not even a porch light in the distance. The place stood alone, perched on the slope like it had grown out of the mountain itself. Ron had built it himself back in the 70s. He liked to remind people of that, and it had a weird charm. 3 levels stacked on top of each other, like someone kept adding floors whenever they had free time. The top level was just a loft with a tiny bedroom and a wooden balcony. The middle level had a kitchen, living room, and another bedroom, and the basement, well, that was the odd part. It was set into the hill, so it had a door that opened straight out onto the slope. That level was always kind of ignored. Ron used it to store tools, buckets of paint, spare planks of wood, his hunting gear, and the kind of junk that somehow multiplies when no one is watching. Nobody slept down there. Every summer I stayed there. It was like a family tradition, even if no one else seemed excited about it. I spent most of my days hiking through the trees. There were old stone walls half swallowed by moss, and sometimes I found the crumbled remains of a chimney, the last marker of some long-forgotten house. I loved that part, the mystery of it. But at night, it was like something shifted. Not just in the trees, in the house. It started slow. The first time I noticed anything weird, I was already in bed on the main floor. Everyone else had gone quiet, and I was lying there half asleep when I heard footsteps, not outside. Inside. Slow ones. Pacing. Like someone walking in a circle right there in the bedroom. Not heavy boots, but soft steps. Steady. No pause. Just this lazy loop, like someone thinking while they walked. I sat up, expecting to catch Ron wandering around. Nothing. The room was empty. It was not just the steps either. I started noticing other things. The water pump would come on randomly, and I would hear the kitchen sink running. The kind of sound that makes you think someone left the faucet on by mistake. I went to check, and it was dry. Then there were the toilet flushes, once, twice, late at night when no one else was even awake. Every time I told Ron, he just shrugged and said old plumbing did weird stuff. Or that maybe there were mice in the walls making more noise than I would expect. But the thing is, footsteps do not sound like mice. Toilets do not flush themselves. Then there was the loft. It had this little railing that let you look down into the living room. Kind of charming in daylight. Kind of creepy after sunset. A few times, late at night, I glanced up and saw someone pacing up there. Not fast. Just that same slow, measured movement I had heard in the bedroom. The weird thing was, it always looked like a woman. Not detailed, not crystal clear, but tall, long dress, dark outline. Every single time. I sat there staring, trying to make it out. Then I worked up the nerve, went upstairs to check, and nothing. Just the empty loft, silent as ever. I told myself it had to be the lantern light, but there were not any lights shining into that loft. No headlights. No street lamps, just black trees and darkness outside. No way for a shadow to move like that. Still, I did not let it get to me, not really. I just told myself cabins do strange things. Old wood creaks, lights play tricks, and brains fill in the blanks. But the bathroom, that is where things really turned. It was tucked off the main floor, close to the kitchen. Nothing fancy, tiny mirror, old tiles, weak water pressure, but it always felt off. When I was alone, I heard sounds coming from inside, soft voices. Too quiet to understand, but just loud enough to catch the tone. Sometimes it sounded like people whispering to each other. Other times it was a low humming, like a kid keeping themselves company. One night I was in the shower when the door handle started rattling. Not just once, over and over. Then banging, louder, harder. It shook the whole frame, like someone was trying to tear it open. And then, even with the latch set from the inside, the door burst open, and I swear this scream ripped through the room. High-pitched, sharp, like it sliced through my skull. I dropped the shampoo bottle, slipped on the tiles, scrambled out dripping wet and breathless. Ron came running when he heard the commotion. I told him everything, every single detail. He did not laugh. He did not say I was being dramatic. He just looked at the door for a long second, then said something about wind pressure and faulty latches. But I knew I had locked it. Not long after that, my cousin Nate, 10 years older than me, moved out. He had been staying there off and on, using the basement as his room, though he never talked about it. Once he was gone, I begged Ron to let me move down there. I thought, hey, my own floor, no one walking past my room, more space, more privacy. Perfect. Ron did not love the idea. He said the basement was cold and musty, that I would not like it. But I insisted. He gave in. I cleaned the place from top to bottom. I scrubbed the walls, opened the tiny window to let in air, put up new curtains. I painted the walls this pale gray blue, something soft. I rearranged old furniture until it felt like mine. I even brought down a rug and a lamp from the attic. I wanted to believe it was a fresh start, that whatever weird energy had been upstairs would not follow me down. When I brought it up to Nate a few days later, half joking, half fishing, he gave me this look and said, "Just keep an ear out for the little girl down there. She likes to laugh." I laughed it off, but something about the way he said it stuck. It was not a ghost story tone. It was too casual. Like he was not warning me, just stating a fact. I tried to forget about it. Then, maybe a weekend, my friend Riley came over for the weekend. We were sitting on the basement floor with a bowl of chips between us, talking about school, music, whatever. She got up to use the bathroom and closed the door. Maybe 30 seconds later, she called out, "Okay, haha, very funny." I just stared at her voice through the door. "What?" She opened it looking spooked. I heard laughing right outside. "That was you, right?" I had not moved. She did not sleep over. She said the whole place gave her the creeps and left around 9, even though it meant a long drive back. I did not blame her. A few days later, I was back in the shower down there. Just a normal night. Steam on the mirror, water echoing in the small space. And then I heard movement right outside the bathroom. Footsteps on the floorboards. I called out, "Ron?" No answer. I shut off the water, grabbed my robe and opened the door. There it was again, that laugh. Soft. High. Too close. Then, just behind me, I heard a voice, so clear, it made my knees lock up. "Are you looking for me?" I spun around and saw nothing. No one. I checked the back door. Still shut tight. I opened it just to make sure, and the alarm immediately started blaring. No one had come in. No one had gone out. I ran upstairs, dripping water and shaking so hard I could barely stand. Ron met me at the top of the stairs, already annoyed about the alarm. But once I told him everything, every word, every sound, his face changed. He did not dismiss it. He just said, "If it makes you that uncomfortable, do not sleep down there anymore." Later that night, when the house was quiet again, he told me something else. Apparently, years ago, Nate had said the same thing, that a little girl's voice had talked to him in the basement. Not a dream, not a joke, not a joke. Just matter of fact, I could not shake it. I called Nate the next day, asked him straight, "Why did you tell me about the girl?" There was a pause. Then he said, "I was kidding. When you were a kid, you used to sneak downstairs and laugh at me. I called you the little girl because of that." My stomach dropped. "I never did that," I said. "I never came down there when you lived in the basement." Silence. Then a quiet, "Huh, must have been remembering wrong," and he hung up. That was when things really started to pick up. I would hear her laugh in the middle of the night, sometimes behind the closet door, sometimes near the window. The bathroom door would creak open by itself. The closet swung open once while I lay in bed, and I just lay there frozen, blanket up to my chest. Then came the night when the basement exit opened all on its own, setting off the alarm system. I had not touched it. Ron thought I was screwing around, but I was not. Eventually, I started calling her Sarah. I do not know why. It made it easier somehow. Like if I named her, I could understand her, control it. But I could not. Even after I moved out years later, she stayed in my head. Then one evening, out of the blue, Nate called. "You are sure," he said, voice low, "that you never came downstairs and tried to mess with me? Never laughed at me? Never talked outside my door?" "No," I told him, "never." He paused. Then, "Okay." That was the last time we talked about it. A few friends and I had planned a weekend trip to hike a stretch of the Appalachian Mountains. Not anything extreme, just enough to feel like we had actually gotten away. We weren't survivalists or expert outdoorsmen, just a group of friends who liked getting out on the trails now and then. We packed light, just the essentials for 2 nights. A couple of tents, trail food, extra layers. The idea was to keep it simple, easy, like a reset button. The first day felt like what we signed up for. We hit the trail in the morning, followed the markers, and took breaks when we felt like it. The weather held, no signs of rain, and there were enough uphill stretches to make it feel like we had earned whatever meal we would pull together later. Nothing weird, nothing off. Just trees, dirt, laughter, and the occasional sarcastic complaint about someone's backpack being heavier than everyone else's. By the time the sun started dipping behind the hills, we had found a small, flat space a little ways off the trail that looked good enough for camp. It wasn't a proper campsite, just a wide patch of leaf-covered earth that didn't feel like it would flood if the weather turned. We set up the tents, got the little stove going, and made dinner. Some packaged noodles, trail mix, jerky. Nothing glamorous, but it tasted fine when you're that hungry. We ate, passed around a bottle someone had smuggled into their gear, and sat around joking about how we would probably all freeze to death because no one remembered an extra tarp. It felt normal, better than normal. It felt like the kind of night that ends with a dumb ghost story, and everyone falling asleep halfway through someone's sentence. Then Joel said he had forgotten the deck of cards. We had left a few things behind earlier, non-essentials we didn't feel like carrying until we found our camp spot. There was a spot off the trail about a mile back where we stopped for lunch, and he had stashed the cards in a side pocket of his pack there. He wanted them now. Said he needed something to help wind down, and he was too restless just sitting around. The rest of us gave him a little crap for being forgetful, but no one actually told him not to go. I think we all figured it was fine, plenty of light left, and the trail was familiar. Joel asked if someone would come with him, and I said sure without thinking much of it. Just figured if he was slipping or something happened, it would be better to have 2 people out there. We started walking. It got darker quicker than I expected. The woods felt denser heading back the second time, even though it was the same path. I remember the trail looking narrower, like the branches on either side had leaned in just a little more. We didn't talk much on the way. Joel wasn't cracking his usual jokes, and I was too focused on not tripping over roots in the half-light. When we got close to the spot where we had left the gear, Joel slowed down. Then he just stopped walking altogether. He was staring into the clearing ahead, frozen. I asked what was up, and he shook his head but didn't say anything right away. Then he said, kind of flatly, that he didn't like this part of the woods at night. Said it gave him a weird feeling, like being watched. I laughed, just to break the tension, and told him I would go get the cards and be right back. He didn't stop me, but just as I stepped forward, he said something else. "Don't go near the edge of the ridge," he said, real quiet. I turned and looked at him. "Why?" He hesitated. His face changed a little, like he was about to say something he had been holding in all day. "That's where she screams," he said. "The burning woman. I saw her last night." Just like that, not a joke, not a punchline. His voice had dropped into this low, clipped whisper, and the way he said it made my stomach turn. He wouldn't look at me after that. I didn't ask anything else. I didn't want to know. I grabbed the cards and turned around without looking toward the ridge. We walked back in silence. By the time we reached camp, Joel had gone back to acting normal. We sat around the fire and played a few hands, and no one said a thing about what he had told me. I didn't bring it up. I didn't want the others thinking I was getting sucked into one of Joel's weird moods. But the whole time we played, I couldn't shake the image. Whatever he meant by the burning woman, I just kept my eyes down and waited until everyone was ready to sleep. I zipped myself into my tent and lay down, hoping exhaustion would do the trick. At first, I slept. At least I think I did. But something woke me up. There wasn't a sound, just a shift in the air. And then that smell. At first, I thought the fire had flared up again. It smelled like burning wood, but thicker, more chemical. I sat up, confused, and unzipped the tent flap. Joel was already outside, standing completely still and staring toward the ridge. I stepped out and joined him. The air hit me like a wall. That smell, it wasn't just wood, it was hair. Singed, acrid. Then it changed again. Flesh, burning flesh. It was so strong, I gagged, tried to swallow it down, but the taste clung to the back of my throat. I remember wiping my mouth and looking at Joel, but he didn't move, just kept staring, like he was waiting. Then Marcus came stumbling out of his tent. He looked wild. Shirt soaked in sweat, face pale, eyes darting around like he didn't recognize where he was. He said, I kept hearing it, screaming, in my sleep. It wouldn't stop. Hearing that froze me. I hadn't heard anything, just the smell. The silence had felt so deep I thought my ears were playing tricks on me. But Marcus looked destroyed, like whatever he had dreamed had drained something out of him. We didn't say anything else, just stood there, waiting. And then it happened. The scream cut through the trees like a blade, high-pitched, raw, human, but not fully. It didn't sound like someone calling for help. It was a scream from someone in pain, but drawn out in a way that didn't make sense. Like it was being pulled from the body by force. It came from the ridge, exactly where Joel had said. No one moved. The sound went on and on. Too long. My ears rang. I felt like my entire body locked up. Joel didn't flinch. Marcus looked like he wanted to run but didn't know which way to go. I couldn't breathe until the scream finally stopped. Then came silence again. Not peaceful. Oppressive. The kind that wraps around you and waits. We sat by the fire the rest of the night. None of us said a word. When morning finally came, everything looked normal again. The woods didn't look threatening. The air was cool. No smell, no sounds. But something had changed in all of us. We broke camp fast. Packed like we were late for something. No one joked. No one dragged their feet. Every step away from that ridge felt like peeling off a layer of fear. But the feeling didn't really go away. Not even when we got back to the car. Joel and Marcus didn't talk much on the drive. I think we were all trying to act like it hadn't happened. Like maybe we had been tired, or spooked, or imagined it, but I knew we hadn't. Even after I got home, the smell wouldn't leave me. I scrubbed everything. Washed my clothes twice, showered until the water went cold. Didn't matter. The scent would creep back in. Burning hair. Scorched skin. Not constant, just flashes. Enough to make my stomach flip. That night, I didn't turn off the light. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I would hear the silence again. That terrible, thick silence. And I would wait for the scream. I never went back to the Appalachians after that. Didn't need to. One night on that ridge was more than enough. My cousin Caleb had this old cabin his family barely used anymore. It sat up on a ridge past a few dead-end gravel roads and a couple hours past the last place you could get cell service. He offered it to me for a long weekend if I wanted to get out of town. He said it was a little rundown but solid. He told me it had a stove, some bunks, a pump well, and 4 walls that still held. That was good enough for me. I asked 3 friends to come along: Jonah, Pete, and Mara. None of us had anything better going on, and we all liked the idea of being unplugged for a few days. It sounded simple. We'd hike, eat canned food, maybe do a little target practice, and then come back with stories about how bad we smelled. We loaded up Jonah's old truck with whatever we could fit: blankets, a cooler, canned beans, jerky, some stale trail mix, and 2 rifles that hadn't seen daylight in years. No one really expected anything intense. If I'm being honest, we were mostly excited about sitting around the stove with a drink in hand, arguing about nothing. The cabin was just a bonus. The drive took most of the day. The last leg of it was especially rough, a winding gravel road that climbed forever through thick trees. They were pressed so close together it felt like the forest was trying to grow over the road and reclaim it. At one point we reached a fork where the GPS said to go left, even though that road looked like something a logging truck abandoned a decade ago. Jonah hesitated and asked if we were sure. I said, yeah, that's what the map shows. So we took it. Should have been a red flag right there. By the time we got to the cabin clearing, the sun was already going down. The place looked like it had been forgotten. Pine needles covered the roof, and the porch creaked like it was protesting our arrival. But it was standing, and the air smelled clean. None of us said it out loud, but we all kind of looked at each other like, yeah, this'll do. We were too tired to explore much that first night. We got the fire going, cooked some beans, and played cards on the floor while Ranger, Caleb's wiry, restless dog, sniffed the corners like he was looking for something. The only weird moment came when I stepped outside to get more wood. I remembered Caleb saying if we needed water, there was a spring down the ridge. He told me to just follow the blazes on the trees. I looked for them with my flashlight and spotted a few red slashes on trunks, but they didn't line up right. One pointed east, the next pointed back toward the cabin. Another one seemed to curve up a hill instead of down. I joked that some local kid must have had fun messing with them. Nobody laughed. Jonah just said, "Woods like these will spin you around if you're not careful." The rest of the night was quiet. Weirdly quiet. I remember sitting by the window after the fire burned low and realizing how completely still it was outside. No wind, no bugs, not even the crack of branches. Just silence. The next afternoon, we decided to try shooting. Behind the cabin, there was a narrow trail that dipped into this thick patch of mountain laurel. We figured we'd scout out a clearing beyond it, so we split up a little, staying within shouting distance. That's when I noticed Mara lagging behind. She'd been talking nonstop that morning, teasing Pete, making fun of Jonah's hat, but now she was just still. She wasn't looking at us. Her flashlight was pointed down this slope off to the left, toward a stretch none of us had walked near. She stood stiff, shoulders tight, like her whole body was listening. I called her name. She startled hard, like someone waking up mid-dream. Then she rushed back toward us and muttered something about seeing a deer. She said it moved fast, just for a second. But I saw the way her hands shook when she clipped the flashlight back to her belt. She wasn't scared of a deer. That night is when things really started to turn. It was late, maybe 2 in the morning, when Ranger started growling. Not barking, not whining, just growling, low and steady, like he'd locked onto something he didn't want to warn off, just keep eyes on. He was standing in the center of the room, facing the back wall, head low. His fur was bristled all along his spine. Jonah tried to get him to settle and even offered him jerky, but the dog wouldn't move. When Pete stepped closer, Ranger bared his teeth and snapped, not at us, not really, just at the air near the door. I grabbed the rifle and opened the door. Everything outside looked normal at first. The fire pit still glowed, and the trees stood where we left them. But Jonah, who had followed me out, stiffened and pointed toward the tree line. That's when I saw it. There was something standing between the trees, tall, taller than any person, and completely still. The kind of still that makes your brain itch because nothing living should be that motionless. The branches above it bent outward, like they were pressed aside by its height. It didn't move, didn't sway, just stared. I don't know how long we stood there. Long enough for the others to come out, long enough for Pete's flashlight beam to sweep over it. That's when I saw the shape. Limbs too long, torso too narrow, standing upright but stretched like it had been pulled into a form it didn't quite belong in. Jonah was the first to bolt. He didn't say a word. He just turned and ran inside. Mara was right behind him. Pete stepped back toward the porch, mumbling something that didn't make sense. I stayed for another second, maybe two. I saw it shift. Not a step, not exactly, but when I blinked, it was farther into the trees. Still watching. Every time we looked, it was in a new place, just enough to remind us it was still there. No sound, no warning, just quiet movement. We sat up the rest of the night, too scared to talk above a whisper. Ranger paced nonstop. The thing never came closer, but it didn't leave. It stayed just far enough away to let us know it could wait. When it finally slipped behind the trees and didn't reappear, we didn't wait. We shoved everything we could into the truck, sleeping bags, cans, whatever was near the door, and left the rest. Jonah drove like the truck had teeth chasing it. The gravel spat up behind us, and I watched the trees. Then the scream came. It rose out of the ridge behind us, sharp, piercing, started like a woman screaming, and cracked halfway through like something tearing its own throat. Ranger howled. Mara covered her ears. Jonah floored the gas. We didn't stop until we hit pavement. We slept at a motel with the lights on, everyone fully dressed. None of us talked about what we saw. I didn't go near those mountains for a long time after that. Caleb said I could come back anytime. I said sure, maybe, and changed the subject. The thing is, it wasn't done with me. Months later, during a winter trip with a different group, I ended up back in that part of the state. Not near Caleb's place. We were staying near a ski trail outside a town called Elbridge. Just some light sledding, nothing serious. For most of the trip, it was normal. Just snow and hot drinks and cold fingers. On our second to last night, we were walking back to the car after dark. The fields around us were quiet, covered in fresh snow, and the hills looked smooth in the moonlight. Then I felt it again. That same pressure between my shoulders, like something had locked eyes on me and wasn't blinking. I didn't say anything. Then L, one of the guys walking next to me, leaned in and whispered, "I think something just popped its head up over the hill." It ducked back down, fast, like it wanted me to see it. He didn't know my story, hadn't heard about the cabin. But when I asked what it looked like, he just said, "Big, way too big." And wrong. I didn't see it myself this time, but I didn't need to. The feeling in my chest was the same as that night on the ridge. And I'm not going back. That summer I went up to stay in the Blue Hollow Range. I was helping my Uncle Eli with whatever needed doing around his old ridge cabin. It sat high up, far from anything modern. All rough timber. A tin roof sagging under the weight of years, patched with whatever scraps he could find. The kind of place that looked like it had always been there, leaning slightly, like it was tired of standing. Eli worked in town most of the week. He only made it up on weekends. So he asked me to keep an eye on things, do small repairs, chop wood, haul supplies whenever I went into town. Mostly, just be there, so the cabin wouldn't sit empty too long. It was quiet up there. Not peaceful quiet, waiting quiet. The trails were narrow, cut into the slope by old logging wagons. The trees pressed in close. Sometimes you slowed down without meaning to, not because you were tired, but because it felt like something was around the next bend, and you weren't sure you wanted to see it. The hollows below filled with shadow by mid-afternoon. And once the sun dipped, the ridge sealed itself off from the world. People in Bell Ridge, the little town down the mountain, had their own ways of talking about the place. Everyone had a story. Or if they didn't, they knew someone who did. They didn't tell them like ghost stories. No campfire tone. They just slipped them in, flat and casual, in the middle of ordinary conversations. Someone ringing up your canned chili and batteries might suddenly say, Don't ever whistle after dark up there, then go right back to counting your change. I heard that one a lot. About the whistling. Old Harold lived in a rust-colored trailer at the base of the ridge. He told me the same thing. I'd stopped by to drop off some mail that ended up in our box. He took the envelope, glanced at it, then fixed his eyes on me and said, "You don't whistle up there, not past sundown." I asked why. He didn't answer, just turned and shut the door. Slow, that was answer enough. The first few weeks were uneventful, peaceful even. I passed a section of the roof peeled back by storms, cleared out a hornet's nest from the woodshed, trimmed brush around the fire pit, cooked plain meals, went to bed early, read battered paperbacks by lantern light. The porch became my favorite spot, screened in with rust-colored mesh sagging at the corners. I'd sit out there with a blanket and a mug, tuning the radio until it found a station, sometimes distant country ballads, sometimes static heavy news. At night, I felt alone, but not lonely. Like the mountain had made space for me, like I was borrowing something that wasn't mine, but was allowed, as long as I followed the rules. Then Jay showed up, my cousin, 15 years old, restless, loud, always grinning like he was 2 steps ahead of you. He brought along his friend Callan, lanky, nervous smile, carrying way too much Mountain Dew in his backpack. They arrived unannounced one Friday. Jace looked proud of himself. They wanted to camp outside, sleep under the stars. I told them no. I wasn't dragging blankets and tents out there for raccoons to ransack our food. They bargained. Could they sleep on the porch instead? Close enough to outdoors, safe enough for me not to worry. I said fine. That night they whispered and giggled like little kids, daring each other to peek out into the dark. I sat inside reading, lantern beside me, half ignoring them. Around 11, the banging began. Not knocking. Banging. Heavy fists slamming the door like someone wanted in. I shot up, nearly dropped the lantern, and yanked it open. They were there. Both of them. Pale. Frozen. Not laughing. Not even breathing right. Jace's mouth opened, but no sound came. Callan stammered instead. He said something had walked past the porch, close enough that he saw the top of a bald head moving against the screen. Gliding past. Steady. No turn. No flinch. I'd known Jace his whole life. He loved to mess with people, but the look in his eyes wasn't pretend. He looked hollow. I grabbed a flashlight and jacket and stepped onto the porch. Cold air hit me. The clearing around the cabin was small, 20 feet wide in every direction before the woods swallowed it. I swept the light from side to side. Nothing, just birch bark flashing pale. The boys pressed close behind me. Then we heard it. Leaves shifting, crunching, slow, steady, like footsteps, coming from down the slope near the old orchard. We followed, foolishly. The orchard was barely that anymore. Just a few twisted apple trees bent low with rotten fruit scattered on the ground. The smell was sharp, sweet and sour all at once. I swept the light again. Movement. Something pale sliding behind a trunk, too quick to see properly. Not a deer. Not a raccoon. I told the boys to hang back. Took one step forward. The air shifted. Sudden. Not a breeze. Not weather. Something sharper, heavier. My chest tightened. Behind me, Jace gasped. I turned and saw him drop, clutching his chest. I pulled his hands back. 3 red streaks slashed across his skin, deep and raw. But his shirt wasn't torn. He shot up and bolted. Sprinting uphill into the dark toward the cabin, I froze. Callan stood beside me, rooted. Then came another sound. Bare feet, hitting the road past the orchard, running fast. I chased it. I don't know why. My mind clung to the idea it could be a person. That was easier to accept. I reached the gravel road and swung the light. Empty. And then, without deciding to, I whistled. A tune from when I was a kid. Simple. A moment later it came back. The same tune. Faint. Perfect. Perfect. My mouth went dry. I tried again. A different pattern. This time the answer came quicker. Sharper. Too close. Callan tugged at my sleeve. His voice shook, begging me to stop. I whistled a 3rd time anyway. And then I heard it. A man's voice. Not far, not echoing. Right there, behind the trees. Calm. Steady. "Hey boy," it said. "Come here." We ran. Back through the orchard. Branches snapping against our faces. Callan stumbling behind me. We burst into the cabin and locked the door. I shoved a chair under the handle. Jace sat pale on the couch, pressing a rag to his chest, pretending to be tough, but barely holding it together. We stayed awake all night. Didn't talk much. Just listened. Now and then, something moved on the porch. Slow. Almost like steps. But we didn't look. When morning came, the light felt wrong. Thin. Reluctant. Jace's scratches were puffy but not bleeding. We packed everything fast, loaded the truck, and drove off the mountain without speaking. Later, Jace brushed it off, said maybe it was a drifter. High or crazy. Trying to scare us. Callan never said a word about it again. But me, I can't forget that whistle. We were up there for weeks at a time, cutting back brush, moving fallen trees, fixing switchbacks, hauling out rocks. Hard work, yes, but not complicated. And I liked the solitude. The mountains folded into themselves until it felt like we were the only people left in the world. By the third week, we were in a groove. The crew had our routines down. Our camp was a ring of canvas tents set up around an old ranger station that probably had not been used for 40 years. The place was half collapsed, moss growing inside the walls, but it made a good spot to store gear and stay dry. A narrow creek ran past the edge of camp. It was fast and freezing cold, fed by springs farther up the slope. That morning, a local trail courier came through on foot with a message. A little settlement a few miles up the ridge, one of those off-grid communities that kept to themselves, was accusing us of sneaking into their yards at night and skinning their goats. Not just killing or stealing, they said, but slicing the hides clean off and leaving the bodies behind. Accusations like that were not unheard of in those parts. Livestock disappears, and whoever is nearby gets blamed. But the weird part was what a hiker told the courier. He had seen people from the settlement hauling bundles down the mountain in the early morning, whole families leaving with whatever they could carry, not visiting relatives, not anything routine, just walking away. Our foreman did not want trouble to escalate, so he picked 6 of us to go take a look. I was one of them. We packed up, grabbed radios, and headed out before the sun came up. The road we took was little more than a narrow, winding trail that climbed sharply, switchback after switchback through thick forest. After nearly an hour of trudging uphill, we came out into a clearing where the settlement sat. It was not big, just over a dozen cabins behind a rough fence of sharpened logs. Everything looked still. No smoke from chimneys, no animals in the pens, no kids playing outside, just empty, like they had all vanished at once. Right as we crossed into the clearing, the radios on our belt started acting up. At first I thought it was just static, but it was heavier than the usual crackle, a low roar building up. Then the voices started. Not one voice, but dozens. They spoke at once, overlapping and layered, impossible to understand. There was no shouting, just constant murmuring that made my stomach twist. The noise filled my ears until I had to pull the headset off. The others did the same. One guy threw his radio in the dirt and stomped on it. The sound cut out as suddenly as it had come, and the silence that followed felt louder. We did not talk about it. We kept moving forward, maybe 20, 30 yards from the gate, and the noise came back. Only this time we could pick out words, broken phrases, and strange rhythms. One guy said it sounded like Cherokee. Another swore it was Latin. To me, it had the cadence of Russian shortwave radio practice came to mind. None of it made sense. Whatever it was, it did not fit. We ditched the radios for good. When we reached the gate, we saw the blood, a long trail smeared through the dirt like something had been dragged. Inside the fence, near the center of the settlement, there was a dark pool on the ground, thick and dried, as if something had bled out there and no one had cleaned it up. Then the shooting started. 3 men burst from one of the cabins and opened fire with rifles. We hit the ground fast. Splinters flew off the logs beside me. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst. I ducked behind a collapsed chimney, trying to catch my breath. One of the shooters came around the corner. He raised his gun. I did not think. I pulled the trigger. Again and again. He staggered back, fell to his knees, then collapsed, choking. His blood spread fast across the dirt. I did not move. I could not. I stared at him, my hands shaking, listening to the wet rattle in his throat until it stopped. Reinforcements from the ranger station showed up minutes later. The rest of the attackers were taken down quickly. 8 dead, 2 barely alive and bleeding out. None of us from the crew had been hit. Later that day, a couple of neighboring families came with 4 women from the settlement. They had been hiding in a hollow all night and refused to come back until we swore it was safe. They looked half-starved and terrified. Through our interpreter, they began to talk. The men in the settlement, they said, had been preparing for something, an ambush. They believed they were going to be rewarded for it. Not paid, rewarded. But the reason the women had fled was what happened the morning before. At sunrise, they had seen something walking up the wagon road. A man, or something that looked like one, but without skin. Muscles and tendons were bare, glistening, no hair, no eyes. His jaw hung open and his guts spilled from a split that ran down his belly. They described limbs that moved wrong, like a puppet handled by someone who did not know how joints worked. His head wobbled on his neck and rolled loosely from side to side. His breathing sounded like someone drowning, wet, labored, bubbling. The men of the settlement grabbed guns and tools and ran out to face him. They shot until pieces flew off. But he did not slow down. He did not even flinch. When they were out of ammo, he opened his arms like he was welcoming them and screamed. The scream blew out eardrums, burst blood vessels, made some of the men collapse. Then the figure turned into a red mist, and the men who had fallen vanished with it. Just gone. All that was left was the trail of blood we saw at the gate. That was enough for us. We packed up what gear we had and started heading back down before the sun dipped too low. About half a mile from camp, the lead truck slammed on the brakes. Someone up front yelled for us to drop. We bailed out of the vehicles and dove into the brush. At first I thought it was another ambush, but when the headlights stayed on, we saw it. A horse lay across the track. Its legs had been severed cleanly at the joints, stacked nearby like someone had lined them up on purpose. Its skull was twisted completely around, snapped backward. The flank had been skinned perfectly, no tearing, no mess, just gone. From its belly, a shard of mirror stuck out. It was huge, probably 5 or 6 feet long, wedged deep. The glass caught the fading light like it was lit from within. We did what we were trained to do. We checked for traps, wires, anything mechanical. There was nothing. Just that horse in the mirror. Carved into the exposed skin were symbols. Not letters, not anything I recognized. Our interpreter crouched next to them, whispering to himself. He finally said they reminded him of Farsi, twisted and wrong. The translation he gave us was short, and it sent a chill down my spine. Look, don't look, he said. That night our foreman told us we were imagining things. Stress messes with your head, he said. Get some sleep. The report would only mention the gunfire. Nothing else. No one argued. But something had changed in camp. You could feel it. It all fell apart in the shower block. First came the screams. Then 2 guys ran out slipping on the wet floor, pale and shaking. They said their reflections had no skin, just raw muscle and exposed bone. We thought they were joking, until more people started seeing it. I did not want to believe it. I tried to ignore it, but the next morning I stood in front of the mirror, razor in hand, and saw him. Just a flicker at first, then he was there, the man without skin, standing behind me in the glass, swaying gently, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, staring. I did not turn around. I backed away, hands trembling. There was nothing behind me, but in the mirror he was still there. That was years ago. Since then I have not kept a single mirror in my house. I pay a barber once a week. Bright fluorescent lights, no reflective surfaces. The last time I tried to shave at home, my daughter walked in. She stopped in the doorway, staring past me. In the mirror, he stood next to her. She screamed so loud I dropped the razor. She ran before I could move. Most of the men from that crew are gone now. One got caught under a logging truck. Another was buried in a landslide. 2 more ended their own lives. The interpreter and his entire family were found dead in their cabin. No suspects, nothing stolen, just gone. When I finally sat down and did the math, it hit me. 8 dead, 2 broken. Same as the women said back in that settlement. I rarely talk about this. People think mountain stories are folklore, ghost tales, and campfire nonsense. But I know the Appalachians are old. Older than our maps, older than names. Something lives deep in those ridges that does not forgive trespass. I was 17 when I started helping my uncle manage a few old cabins he owned outside Mercer Ridge, Virginia, along a stretch of sloping forest that felt a few decades behind the rest of the world. He always called it a side gig, but honestly, it was more like a long-term excuse not to sell off the land. The cabins had been in our family for generations, built back when people just cleared a spot and raised a roof. Some of them had no power. A few didn't even have plumbing. Every Saturday morning, we'd make the drive up in his dusty old truck. He'd toss a thermos of black coffee in the cup holder, wedge a cigarette behind his ear like it was part of his skull, and I'd sit beside him with my boots laced, ready for whatever job needed doing. We always had tools rattling around in the back, shovels, pruners, sometimes a busted weed eater that never worked when we needed it. Most of the work was nothing special: clearing brush, cleaning fire pits, topping off propane tanks, that kind of thing. But once summer hit its stride, the forest started to push back. You'd clear a trail one week and come back the next to find it already swallowing itself again. Trees lean a little closer. Roots climb out of the ground like they're stretching. It never felt spooky, just persistent. Like the woods had a memory and didn't appreciate you rearranging things. I liked being out there though. No cell reception, no highway noise, just birds, bugs, and the soft crunch of leaves under your boots. It was the kind of quiet that made your thoughts feel louder. After a few weeks, I started bringing my best friend Caleb along. He was 18, tall, always wore the same ratty ball cap, and didn't flinch at dirt or spiders, which made him my ideal partner for the job. My uncle didn't mind, said it was good for us. Keeps your hands busy and your brain out of trouble, he'd say while lighting another cigarette with the one he hadn't finished. That summer, Caleb and I got into this rhythm. We'd take on whatever chores my uncle gave us, then spend the rest of the afternoon poking around the woods. There were all these old trails out there, half lost, overgrown, barely more than faint lines in the underbrush. We made it a kind of challenge. Find something old, something no one had seen in years. Most of the time we just found junk, glass bottles, rusted tools, the occasional square nail from God knows when. Once, we found a boot half swallowed by a tree, like the roots had wrapped around it, trying to wear it. Another time, we dug up this tangle of barbed wire twisted around a stone pillar with no fence, no path, nothing attached to it. Just sitting there like it had been waiting, but none of that stuck with me the way what we found behind Cabin 9 did. Cabin 9 was set apart from the others, further back, deeper into the trees. It had a sagging porch and moss creeping up the siding, windows that looked more like suggestions than actual glass. My uncle always saved that one for last, said it was barely standing but stubborn. That week, he wanted us to clear a new path behind it, up the ridge and toward a fire break he remembered from when he was a kid. Thought it might connect the cabins to a spot we could use for firewood. So Caleb and I grabbed the machetes and went in. It was slow going. The laurel and rhododendron were so thick we had to crouch and slice our way forward one branch at a time. It felt like crawling through some kind of green tunnel. The air was thick, and the light dimmed to this strange filtered green that made it hard to tell what time it was. After maybe 3 hours of sweat, cuts, and muttered curses, we broke through. And just like that, we were standing in a clearing. It wasn't big, maybe 30 feet across. But what made it weird was how perfect it looked. The grass was short, soft, like someone had been mowing it. But there were no tracks, no signs of equipment, no animal droppings, no trash. Just a flat, even stretch of green, ringed by thick brush. Then we noticed the carvings. Small wooden figures, maybe a foot tall each, stood around the edges of the clearing. Dozens of them, all shaped like people, all kneeling with their hands over their faces, like they were weeping or praying or hiding. Some were old, cracked and gray with weather. Others looked fresh, as if they'd been carved that week. No two were the same. Each had different details, some with carved folds in their robes, others with weird patterns on their backs. Caleb, of course, walked straight over and kicked one. It didn't move, just made this strange hollow sound, like knocking on an old cabinet. He laughed. I didn't. At the center of the clearing was a rectangular dip in the earth. Not deep, maybe a couple feet down, but the grass stopped right at its edge. No roots in the soil, no leaves, just bare dirt. And at one end, a slab of concrete stood leaning at an angle, half sunken and covered in vines. Looked like a crude headstone. I brushed it off with my sleeve. Beneath the dirt were carvings, not letters. Symbols. Spirals, triangles, shapes that seemed to shift the more I stared at them. It looked less like writing and more like diagrams. Something technical, something calculated. We didn't stay long. The air felt thick, like the silence was pushing back. Even Caleb got quiet on the way out, which was rare for him. When we got back to the truck, I told my uncle what we saw. He didn't blink, didn't ask for details. Just started the engine and said, "That hollow's been quiet longer than I've been alive. Best leave it that way." But Caleb couldn't leave it. Next morning, he showed up at my front door with a flashlight and a crowbar. "We're going back," he said. "I want to see what's under that slab." I should have said no. I almost did. But the thought of him going alone didn't sit right, so I grabbed my boots and followed him. We reached the clearing just after noon. It looked the same at first. Then I noticed the carvings. They'd moved. Now they were arranged in a tight circle around the depression. All still kneeling, still covering their faces, but they were facing inward, toward the pit. Toward whatever was under the slab. I stopped walking. Caleb didn't. He knelt beside the slab and started pulling vines loose with his bare hands. I walked to the edge of the pit, and that's when I saw it. The ground had been disturbed. It wasn't subtle. Someone, or something, had dug into the center. The soil was piled up at the sides. The slab had been shifted. Not much, just enough to reveal a dark slit between the concrete and the earth. "There's a space under it," Caleb said, crouched beside me. "Like a hollow chamber or something." I asked how he could tell. He didn't answer. Then we heard it. A dragging sound in the brush, slow, deliberate. Not scurrying like a deer, not the wind. Something heavier. It circled the clearing. We couldn't see it, but we could hear it. Branches breaking, leaves shifting. The soft pull of something big moving in a wide arc around us. Then came two slow knocks, like wood on wood. The sound echoed through the clearing. I whispered, "We need to go." This time, he didn't argue. We turned and ran. But the woods had changed. The path we'd cut was gone. Completely. The laurel was intact, unbroken. Like we'd never been there. We tried every direction. Got turned around fast. The sun dipped behind the clouds, and the forest dimmed. Every tree looked the same. We walked in circles for over an hour. Eventually, we hit a fire road and followed it out until we found cabin 9. We didn't speak. Didn't look at each other. Just climbed into the truck and drove back down the mountain. My uncle didn't ask a thing. After that, we never worked that ridge again. He started giving us tasks on the far side of the property, near the gravel road and the newer cabins. The clearing, we didn't talk about it. Didn't mark it on any maps. It stopped coming up. Caleb moved to Ohio the next spring. Got a job, met someone, settled down. I stayed, helped my uncle when I could. Kept busy. But I never hiked near that ridge again. Then, just last week, I saw Caleb. It was at a gas station off Route 219. He looked tired. Thinner, like he hadn't been sleeping. We chatted for a bit, caught up. Then he asked me something. "Do you ever think about the clearing?" he said. I didn't answer. He said he'd been dreaming about the carvings. Said in the dreams, they were always closer. Said he'd tried to go back, twice. Both times he found the hollow. But the clearing was gone. No grass. No carvings. Just thick brush, tangled roots, and the sound of wind through the trees. I didn't tell him what I'd found last month. One of the cabins, cabin 6, had a drainage issue. We had someone come check the foundation. While digging, they uncovered something strange wedged beneath the porch. A small wooden carving. Kneeling. Hands over its face. Blackened like it had been scorched. They gave it to me, thinking it was some old folk art. I didn't take it home. I drove it deep into the woods, left it on a stump where the clearing used to be, walked away and didn't turn around. A few days in the mountains, away from everything, maybe helped them out with some of the renovations. It sounded peaceful, at least in theory. The place was massive. It was one of those early 20th century homes with too many rooms, weird stair landings, and windows taller than you would expect. It sat kind of sunken into the land, surrounded by woods on all sides except the front, where a narrow gravel driveway snaked out toward the road. Well, road might be generous. It was more like a logging path someone had paved halfway, then given up on. You could drive 20 minutes in either direction without seeing another house. The nearest gas station was just under an hour away, and it closed at 7. Liv's parents had just gotten the keys a couple months earlier and were living there full-time while fixing it up. Her brothers, Devin and Harris, were older than us, early 20s, strong, always bickering but tight with each other. They had been coming up on weekends to help with the heavier work. They had torn out most of the upstairs floors already, which meant only a few rooms were usable, and none of the upstairs ones were available to guests. That left me and Liv on the main floor. She pulled out the sleeper couch for me in the big living room. She dragged in a cot from one of the empty rooms to sleep next to me. It was actually kind of sweet of her, not wanting me to feel like I was alone out there in the middle of that big echoey room with windows on 3 sides. The room was mostly cleared out, save for a few folding chairs, some unpacked boxes, and a giant floor lamp with a broken switch. I remember lying on the pull-out mattress and realizing I could see straight out into the woods, just endless dark past the window panes. But that first night was fine, genuinely fine. We stayed up late, just talking, about dumb things mostly. Stuff from high school, how weird her dad was getting about the rental plans, whether the giant metal tub in the basement was original or a death trap. Eventually, we passed out, and I did not even remember falling asleep. I just woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon, like something out of a movie. The second night, that is the one that sticks with me. It was not a sound that woke me. That is the part I still cannot explain. There was no bang, no creak, no whisper of footsteps. It was just this sudden jolt, like my body kicked itself awake without checking with me first. I blinked, confused, my brain still foggy, and that is when I saw him. There was a man at the window. At first, it did not compute. You know how your brain tries to rewrite things to make sense. I thought maybe it was a reflection, a weird shadow, maybe someone from inside standing in front of the window, but no. He was outside. He was standing right up against the glass, hands pressed flat against it, fingers splayed out wide like he was trying to shield his eyes from the reflection. His head was tilted slightly, slowly moving side to side like he was scanning the room. His silhouette filled the window perfectly, just black against the faint glow of the porch light. And the worst part, he was inches away from Liv. She was asleep, curled up on her side, facing that window, completely unaware that this man, this shape, was just standing there, watching. I could not move. It was like my entire body had been vacuum sealed into the mattress. I was trying to breathe silently, which made everything louder somehow. The only detail I could really make out was the outline of him. No features, no color, just the unmistakable shape of a person who had absolutely no reason to be there. Then I felt it, the moment he turned his attention to me. It was not visual. I did not see his eyes or anything. But I knew. Every part of me knew he had turned toward me, even if nothing moved. My skin started to crawl. You know when your body warns you something is wrong before your mind catches up. That. And then he vanished. Just gone. Not like he walked away, not like he ducked or backed up. He just was not there anymore. I barely had time to process the relief when something caught my eye off to the left. One of the side windows. Movement. Same man. Same posture. Still watching. Still searching. He was circling the house. My brain was screaming at me to do something. I slid off the mattress as quietly as I could and crouched low behind the wide doorway that led into the hall. My knees felt like they might give out. I could barely keep my balance. And then he was back. Right there at that window now, head snapping toward the doorway where I was hiding. This time it was not vague. He saw me. His head turned so fast it could not be anything else. He knew exactly where I was. I did not think. I just ran, up the stairs, 2 at a time. I nearly slipped, grabbed the railing with both hands, and crashed into Liv's parents' door so hard it swung open before I could even knock. "Someone's outside," I blurted. "He's at the window." He was watching us. Her dad did not hesitate for a second. He jumped out of bed, grabbed the thick walking stick he kept by the dresser, and was already halfway to the stairs by the time Devin and Harris appeared. One was holding a hammer, the other with a crowbar. I barely had time to explain again before they flew down the stairs and burst out the front door. Liv stumbled in behind me, rubbing her eyes, confused. Her mom was trying to calm me down, but her voice was tight, shaky. She kept glancing toward the windows too, like she did not want to admit she believed me, but she did. We stood there waiting, silent, listening. When they came back, they said the yard was empty. They had checked all the way around the house, even the shed and the driveway. Nothing. No broken twigs, no tracks in the gravel, no sign anyone had ever been there. Her mom tried to brush it off. Could have been a hunter, she said, trying to sound casual. Maybe he was lost, looking for help. But her voice cracked a little, and no one laughed. Nobody really slept that night. We turned off the lights, but nobody wanted to be the first to close their eyes. Even the smallest sound made someone sit up. By morning, the whole house felt heavy with exhaustion. Her dad downplayed it, of course. If someone really wanted to break in, he said over coffee, they would have tried. But none of us believed that made it better. That whole day, we stayed close to the house. Even Devin and Harris, who normally could not wait to get out and climb rocks or mess around in the woods, just hung around the porch, pretending to fix a railing that was not broken. The morning I was supposed to leave, I dragged my feet packing. Something still felt off, like I was forgetting something or like there was something unfinished just hanging in the air. Liv's mom made a big breakfast, pancakes, eggs, the whole thing. She said it was for the road, but I think it was more for comfort. My mom had driven up that morning to come get me. She was waiting in her car, parked just past the bend in the gravel driveway where the trees thinned out. I gave everyone hugs, thanked them, did the whole polite goodbye thing. I was halfway down the walkway when it happened. The horn, 2 long blares, then a short one, loud, urgent. I froze. My mom has her quirks, but she does not do that. She would never just lay on the horn unless something was seriously wrong. I took off running. As I came around the bend, I saw the car sitting there, completely still, engine off, doors shut except one. The back passenger door was wide open. My heart shot up into my throat. I sprinted the rest of the way. My mom was hunched over the steering wheel. "Mom!" I yelled, yanking the driver's side open. She did not respond. She was breathing but limp, eyes closed, head down. I shook her. Nothing. I screamed back toward the house for help, and within seconds, Liv's dad and the boys came tearing down the drive. We pulled her out of the car and carried her back up to the house. She came to about a minute later, gasping like she had just come up from underwater, completely confused. No idea how she got into the car. No memory of pressing the horn. She looked embarrassed when we told her, like she was trying to play it off. "Probably just exhaustion," she said. "I did not eat this morning. Must have fainted." But then she lifted her wrist to check the time. Her watch had stopped. The hands were stuck, exactly at the time the horn first went off. We stared at it in silence. No one said anything, but I think everyone felt it. That shift in the air, like something had brushed past us. Hours later, as we finally drove off through the winding, narrow roads, I glanced over again. The second hand was ticking again, moving like nothing had ever happened. Every summer, like clockwork, my parents would pack up my duffel bag. They would give me a quick hug at the train station and send me off to spend a few weeks with my grandfather. He lived way out in a tiny mountain town called Halder's Ridge, not even big enough to have its own stoplight. Time didn't rush there. It just trudged along, slow and quiet like the people who lived there. Grandpa's house sat right at the edge of the Appalachians. It was one of those squat wooden homes patched up so many times it was hard to tell what part was original. He said he built it with his dad back in the 40s. Honestly, it looked like it. The paint was faded to a soft gray blue. The porch sagged in the middle. The windows rattled if the wind picked up, but it was sturdy, solid, like Grandpa himself. He was a quiet man, not cold, just economical with his words. He got up with the sun, worked hard, and didn't believe in wasting time or energy on things that didn't matter. I respected that about him, even if I was only 11 and didn't always get it. Most of what I knew about him came from watching. He kept chickens. He grew everything from tomatoes to squash in his garden. He had a tall, leaning stack of split firewood along the back wall of the house. Even in July, he'd be preparing for winter. Most days followed a rhythm that never really changed. Chores first, always. I'd collect eggs, sweep off the porch, and carry buckets of water from the pump to the coop. If I moved fast enough, Grandpa would nod once and say, "Go on then." That was my signal. I was free to roam. The woods behind his property were massive, untouched, dense, and winding. I used to think of them as a maze made just for me. I'd follow deer tracks, climb over rocks and rotted logs, and sometimes stumble on an old stone fence or the bones of a collapsed cabin. It felt ancient, like the forest had secrets. Grandpa never worried about me getting lost. He said the land spoke if you knew how to listen. Watch the rise and fall of the ground, he told me once. Pay attention to the bend of the hills. The mountain always tells you how to get back. One afternoon, maybe halfway through my stay that summer, he asked me to bring in more firewood from the shed. Instead of going down the gravel drive, which was quicker, I decided to take the long trail that cut through the woods. It was more fun that way. The path was narrow and overgrown in spots, but I knew every twist in it by heart. There was a little wooden bridge that crossed a dry creek bed. Honestly, the thing looked like it was held together with hope and termites. I used to jump on it just to hear the groan of the planks beneath my feet. But that day, I didn't jump. I came around the bend and froze. There was someone standing on the bridge. He looked like a hiker, tall, wiry, wearing a faded green baseball cap pulled low. A small pack hung off one shoulder like he'd only been out a few hours. At first, I thought he might be a park ranger or maybe a lost tourist. But nobody came that deep into the woods. Grandpa's land was past the last marked trail. We didn't get visitors, ever. The man just stood there, right in the middle of the bridge, like he belonged there. Then he looked up, right at me. His eyes found mine too fast. He smiled. Wide, too wide, too wide. Like someone had been practicing it in the mirror and still hadn't gotten it right. Then he asked my name. Not shouted, just loud enough to carry across the creek bed. His voice was too calm, too smooth. Something in my chest twisted. I didn't say a word. I didn't even nod. I kept walking like I hadn't heard him. My heart thudded in my throat. I could feel his eyes follow me until the trees swallowed the trail behind me. When I got back to the house, I didn't mention it to Grandpa. I didn't know what to say. Hey, a stranger tried to smile the skin off his face and asked for my name in the woods. Sounded ridiculous even in my own head. That night, after dinner, we were locking things up. I followed Grandpa out onto the porch, and there he was again. The same man, sitting at the edge of the yard where the grass met the trees, legs crossed, elbows resting on his knees, like he'd been there a while, watching the house. When he saw me, he lifted his hand and waved, slow, deliberate, like he was in no hurry at all. I blinked, gone, vanished into the trees like he'd never been there. I didn't sleep much that night. Every creak of the house made me sit up and stare at the window, but the woods stayed quiet. No footsteps, no voices, just silence so thick it pressed against the glass. The next morning I went out to feed the chickens. Sitting right there by the fence, like it had been placed with care, was a small tin whistle, dented, worn. It had that dull gray look metal gets after it's been handled too much. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. I'd never seen it before. No one else ever came up here. I brought it inside thinking maybe it was Grandpa's or something he found in the dirt. The second he saw it, something in his face changed. His jaw tightened. His eyes went cold. "Leave it on the porch," he said, voice low and sharp. "Don't touch it again." He didn't explain. He went back to drinking his coffee. I did what he said. I left it sitting there and tried to put it out of my mind. It didn't work. A few days later, I walked the trail again. Against my better judgment, honestly. I don't even know why I did. Curiosity? Stupidity? Stupidity? Habit? The whistle was sitting on the bridge's railing, propped up carefully, like someone had set it there for me. And just up ahead, right past the bend where the trail turned uphill, the man was standing again. Not moving, just watching. His head tilted slightly to one side, like he was trying to figure out what I'd do next. Then he raised his hand. The same motion as before. Inviting, like he was beckoning me over. I turned and ran. I didn't think. I didn't look back. I tore through the woods so fast the branches scraped my arms and legs. My lungs burned by the time I reached the house. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard it. Music. Soft, wheezy, broken notes playing just outside my window. That same whistle. A slow, uneven melody that twisted through the dark. The kind of sound that makes the hairs on your neck stand up even though you can't explain why. I called for Grandpa. He didn't ask questions. He grabbed the shotgun and went out into the yard, flashlight sweeping the tree line. He came back a few minutes later, jaw clenched. He said the woods were empty. Then he locked the door, pushed a chair up against it, and didn't say another word. He wouldn't let me outside alone after that, not even to check the coop. I didn't argue. A couple days later, we drove into town to get supplies. Halder's Ridge had one general store, a tiny place that smelled like dust and jerky. And he was there. The man. Standing in line ahead of us, leaning on the counter like he had all the time in the world, whistling that same jagged tune. His lips barely moved, but the sound filled the room. His eyes found mine and didn't look away. Grandpa grabbed my arm and yanked me out the door. He didn't buy a thing. He didn't speak until we were halfway down the mountain road. Even then, all he said was, "I know who he is. He's not supposed to be anywhere near kids." That was it. No more details. Just a statement with too much weight behind it. About a week later, it hit the local paper. The man had been arrested near the Kentucky border. Tried to cross with no ID, and they'd pulled him over. Inside his car, they found boxes, photos, tapes, notebooks. Some of it dated back years, but some of it was recent. Very recent, taken in the woods. Some right near Halder's Ridge. I never went back to Grandpa's alone after that. The next summer, he chained the bridge shut with thick iron links and rusted padlocks. I wouldn't even go near it. It didn't matter if I was with someone or not. The listing had sounded kind of romantic in a rugged, outdoorsy way. Fresh air, time in the woods, basic pay plus room and board. It beat flipping burgers back home in Millbridge, and I figured a few months away wouldn't hurt. The job itself was straightforward. They gave me a heavy canvas pack with the usual gear, a small hatchet, a folding saw, a paint can and brush for refreshing the white trailblazes. There was a clunky two-way radio too, in case I needed to call something in. I'd been warned more than once not to rely on cell service. The rules were simple. Repaint the blazes where they'd faded, clear anything blocking the trail, and report anything unusual. That last part was vague, but I didn't question it. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. The ranger cabins were a cluster of 3, tucked off a gravel access road near the northern edge of the park. I stayed in the middle one with 2 other guys, Clint and Nate. Clint was in his early 30s and already looked like he belonged in the forest, beard, calloused hands, sunburnt neck. Nate was older than both of us, quieter, always with a book or a cigarette. Neither talked much, but they weren't unfriendly. Just forest people. We had propane for cooking, solar lights that mostly worked, and a hand pump well behind the cabins. You learn fast to stop missing the internet when your evenings are spent sharpening tools and listening to coyotes. Most days we hiked trails together, keeping each other company with dumb jokes or arguments about which canned soup was the least awful. But sometimes the foreman, Cal, sent us out alone if a section needed extra coverage. I liked those solo days. There was something steadying about them. Just you and the rhythm of your work, marking blazes, clearing brush, noting anything out of place. It made your thoughts quiet down. One morning, about 3 weeks in, Cal handed me a laminated map. His finger traced a red line branching off one of the routes. Old Northridge, he said. Hasn't been maintained in a while. Blaze it clean, see if it's worth reopening. I frowned. I'd studied that map before and never noticed that trail. Was this part even on the sheet before? I asked. Cal didn't answer right away. He just said, "It's old. You won't find it on the hiker's map. Stay on the blazes, don't take side cuts, and keep your radio on." That last part wasn't something he usually said. I remember that clearly. I set off early, following the main route for a couple of miles until I reached the fork for North Ridge. The shift was obvious. The newer trails were clean and warm, but this one was overgrown, barely a track. Roots clutched at my boots. Rocks were loose and slick. Trees grew tighter. The air felt different, heavier somehow. About a mile in, I painted a clean white rectangle on a tree. Crisp edges, good visibility. When I stepped back, I noticed another blaze on the next tree up ahead. It looked identical to mine. Same paint, same size, but newer. Still glossy like it had just been applied. I paused. I hadn't seen Clint or Nate leave ahead of me. Cal hadn't mentioned anyone else, but maybe one of them got an early start. Maybe Cal forgot to say. Or maybe I was overthinking. I kept going. Another 15 minutes in, more blazes appeared. Fresh paint, still wet, dripping down the bark. I ran a finger through one and left the streak. Someone had been here, maybe only minutes before. I tried the radio, nothing but static. I adjusted the knob, changed channels, climbed a rock for height. Still nothing. I figured I'd catch up eventually, so I kept following. But the spacing changed. Trail blazes are supposed to be placed at intervals to guide hikers. These weren't. They were too regular, too precise. Every tree in sight was marked. Not guiding a path, more like pointing somewhere. That's when I felt it. That slow, creeping wrongness. The blazes pulled me uphill to a small clearing I didn't recognize. In the center was an old fire ring, stones black with soot, overgrown with moss. On the far edge, another fresh blaze gleamed on a pine, angled toward a narrow game trail. I should have turned around. Instead, I followed. The trail dipped into a gully, the ground soft beneath my boots. That's when I saw footprints. Bare, wide, long, pressed deep into the soil like whoever made them was heavy or not built like us. I crouched. The edges were sharp, no scuffs, no debris. Fresh, and leading uphill. I counted more than a dozen before losing track, all pointing deeper. I raised the radio again, still static. I stood, and that's when I saw it. 30 feet ahead, off to the left. A smear of red on a trunk. I stepped closer. It was a handprint, not paint. Fingers too long, the shape wrong. Dragged downward in a streak. It wasn't old. My stomach turned. I turned back down the gully, but the trail had changed. Both sides of the earthen walls were now smeared with red handprints. Dozens. Some small, some larger than mine by half. All fresh, all wet. None of them had been there before. I froze, heart hammering. Then I bolted forward, thinking I could outrun it. But the path just tightened. Trees closed in, blazes everywhere, one on every trunk. Handprints appeared too, low to the ground, stacked, some smeared across the earth like someone had crawled through. I dropped the pack. It snagged on a branch. I didn't stop. I clawed up the gully side, grabbing roots and rocks. My palms tore open. Dirt filled my nails. I didn't care. When I pulled myself over the ridge, I didn't stop running. Not until I saw the main trail. And even then, I didn't slow down. I ran until I hit the cabin clearing. Clint and Nate were on the steps, eating lunch. When they saw me shirt torn, arms bleeding, mud on my legs, they stood fast. Cal came out of the shed, wiped his hands on a rag and told me to sit. I tried to talk, words choppy. I told them what I'd seen, the trail, the blazes, the prints, the handprints. My voice cracked. I didn't care. Cal just listened, no surprise on his face. When I finished, he paused, then said, calm as ever, "That ridge doesn't show up on our maps anymore. We closed it off years ago. Some places, they don't stay quiet. Don't go back." That night I didn't sleep. I laid in my bunk, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. Around midnight, I stepped outside. The woods were pitch black, silent, no wind, no bugs, no animals. When I turned back toward the cabin, I saw it. On the wooden frame of the door, level with my eyes, was a fresh, white blaze. Still wet, gleaming in the moonlight. I went inside, grabbed my duffel, left the tools, and walked the gravel road for 6 hours until I reached town.